Whoa, the light from outside your window just got brighter. It's 9:30 in the evening, and you have a huge exam coming up tomorrow. You peek outside to see if your neighbors use their floodlights again. But they're outside looking up in the sky. You stick your head out and notice that the moon got a lot bigger, double in size. You run outside and ask people what's going on. But they don't have a clue either. You take a picture of it and post it on social media. You view your feed and see that everyone is talking about it. The dark sky is brighter because the moon has more real estate to reflect light from the sun, making the light more intense. You can feel a slight imbalance while walking. Every time you take a step, it feels like you're walking lighter than usual. Because the moon became so large, its gravitational pull became stronger, so gravity became weaker. Suddenly, you look below you and feel your socks are wet. You run and hop on the top of a car and see that there's water flooding your neighborhood. Everyone tries to find higher ground or run back to their houses. This isn't a fire hydrant that busted and is spewing out water. This is ocean water seeping in. You're confused and lose your balance. You slip and fall in the water as it rises. Some people are in their cars, but they can't drive anywhere because of the water. You live near the ocean, but there has never been a tsunami or any flood reports in your whole life. There are no reported earthquakes around the area, so something strange is happening. You run back to your house, trying to see if you can get out your old inflatable raft to help you with the flood. The only problem is that you need to inflate it but don't have your pump. You inflate it with your mouth at first, but it'll take forever to pump it up. You search around your house for an alternative and find your hairdryer. You plug it in and inflate the raft as much as you can until you use your mouth to do the rest. The water level rises by every second and has now entered your house. You pack up a bag with a good flashlight, some food, and thermal blankets. You go downstairs and see that the water is now at your knees. You keep walking until you reach the door. When you step outside, the water pushes you left and right since the waves are very harsh. Since gravity has changed, it's not easy to swim around. You get your raft ready and use it to float yourself down the current in your street. It doesn't help that the water is freezing, and you're in the middle of February. After a while, you reach the highway where water is coming directly from the beach. You manage to get on a high surface and take out your phone. You kept it in a protective compartment in your bag for safety. You only have 15% battery left, but you brought your power bank. You call your family to see what's going on, but they too have no idea. You venture into the forest and try to spot an old cabin you used to visit as a child to see if you left your old bicycle there. After a few minutes, you find it and bike across the mountain to escape the flood. You can't seem to balance yourself since the gravity is affecting you. Some scientists sit around with laptops and spreadsheets, attempting to understand what's happening. Everyone is shouting and throwing out random solutions, but nothing seems to make sense. After a while, the head of NASA decides to launch an unmanned rocket to the moon. The rocket is ready in a few hours, and everyone is awaiting orders. 3, 2, 1, blast off. The rocket soars in the air and approaches the moon. It exits the Earth's atmosphere and travels at full speed in that direction. After a day or two, everyone gets live footage of the giant moon. According to the studies, the rocket can't be too close to the moon since it may have a stronger gravitational pull. However, the footage shows that tiny particles are floating around it, similar to Saturn's rings. These rings look like a giant disk surrounding the large planet, but up close, they're just particles that are the size of rice grains to the extent of a large bus. They're orbiting Saturn because of the gravitational pull. The images show that these particles are big and small, which doesn't make it safe for the rocket to get any closer. So it suspends itself nearby to orbit the moon and unleashes a mini rocket that looks like a drone to get closer. The particles are many miles thick, making it difficult for the mini rocket to maneuver. It flies closer and the particles start crashing on it. It's a good thing that the mini rocket is durable for this. The rocket finally gets past the particles and lands on the moon. Gravity has gotten stronger since it inflated in size, which almost broke the rocket. As soon as it lands, another robot pulls out and starts driving around the surface, trying to get some clues. As of now, nothing is happening. but they're noticing some quivers coming from deep inside the moon. The moon's core is reacting abnormally. It looks like it's getting bigger and bigger. Scientists don't know if it will stop growing at a certain point, so the only way to find out is to drill a hole deep inside to uncover the reason. You're pedaling away and reach the other side of the mountain. The ground is shaking, and your balance is getting worse. You look across the mountain and see that the whole other side of town is flooded. You get your raft and supplies and make it there. You find a rowboat and paddle as fast as you can until you reach the lighthouse. From there, you can try to find the NASA station. Suddenly, you see a large rocket erupt from the ground and into the sky. You know for a fact that your brother is there working, but cellular networks are down. You paddle your way there for safety. The little rocket that landed unleashes a small drill strong enough to go miles to the center. It'll take days for it to reach down. So NASA is already launching another rocket to fly off and bring a bigger drill. The only problem is that the moon is getting bigger, so the particles around the moon also gather a lot more. The moon is reaching the Earth's size, getting bigger by the minute. The flood could reach several coastal states, and many micro-islands could be submerged, so it needs to be prevented. Gravity could affect the structure of most of the buildings, causing them to collapse one by one. But the little robot will not let that happen, so he's drilling to figure out what's going on with the moon. Some of the rocks appear to be getting hotter as it digs. This could be a sign of the moon expanding, which might ultimately explode. The scientists in the room are baffled and don't know what to do. The lead scientist, who is your brother, calls you, but he can't reach you. Meanwhile, you're still paddling around, trying to get to NASA. On your way, you head back to the mountains to stay on dry land. When you arrive back at the old cabin, you see some strange men wearing trench coats looking for you. There's a stare-off until they chase you. They seem odd, like they're not from Earth. The drill has reached its maximum depth and can't go down any longer. Also, the control transmission is getting weaker. Suddenly, a figure pops out of nowhere and flashes its lights on the robot. The transmission chops and only show little snippets of the giant figure eyeing the robot. A little creature descends from the figure and walks toward the robot. Everyone at NASA is freaking out and recording every single frame. No one can believe what's going on. After a while, the creature transmits a signal that NASA can't decipher. But the creature seems friendly. The creature gets back into its ship and in an instant disappears into thin air as it teleports away. The moon starts shrinking. It's getting back to its normal size. Everyone celebrates in NASA and around the world. The currents become calmer and retreat to the coast. It's a good thing everyone reached the higher hills before.
It's dark outside, almost 2 a.m. You go outside and look at the sky, and here it is, bright, full moon. You might think you know a lot about Earth's natural satellite, but let me ask you this: how did it form? The answer is, nobody knows. But of course, there are theories. The most popular one, called the Giant Impact Theory, claims that the moon formed during a collision between Earth and another planet. This planet must have been smaller than ours, the size of Mars, and the collision itself probably happened around 4.5 billion years ago. Another theory, called the Capture Theory, claims that the moon used to be an asteroid or some other wandering body. It formed somewhere else in the solar system. When it was passing by Earth, it got caught by our planet's gravity. But here is one catch. Our planet and the moon have remarkable isotopic and chemical similarities. So, they must have a linked history, which means the moon couldn't have been created elsewhere. Other experts think that at some point in the past, Earth was spinning so fast that some of its material broke away. It soon started to orbit our planet. That's how the moon appeared in the sky. But again, there's one problem. In this case, the proportion and type of minerals on the moon would have to be the same as on Earth. But there are slight differences. The moon is richer in materials that form very fast at high temperatures. There's one more theory, and it's probably the least exciting. It claims that Earth's natural satellite could simply appear along with Earth during our planet's formation. Duh! But these days, a more urgent question keeps astronomers busy. is the moon really Earth's satellite? Or are these two twin planets? The moon is big compared to our planet, about 1/4 of Earth's size. That's why some experts refer to our planetary system as a double planet. But how correct is that? If we want to figure it out, we need to give the definition to the word planet. According to the International Astronomical Union, a planet is a space body that orbits the Sun, is massive enough to have a nearly round shape thanks to its gravity, and has cleared the region around its orbit. Now, what about a satellite? It's an object in space that orbits around a larger celestial body. If we take the system Earth, the Moon, its center of gravity, called a barycenter, is inside the Earth. That's why at the moment we can't say that we live in a twin planet system. According to this definition, the Moon is the satellite of our planet. Now, let's get back to the past, like 3 or 4 billion years ago. Even though the Moon wasn't a planet, it most likely had a full-fledged atmosphere. It formed at times when powerful volcanic eruptions were rocking our satellite. Gases spread all over the Moon's surface, and it happened so fast that they didn't have enough time to escape into space. At that time, the lunar surface was covered with basins filled with volcanic basalt. Just imagine ginormous plumes of magma hurtling high into the air, falling to the ground and creating lava flows. That's how the basalt basins appeared on the surface of the Moon. At one point, scientists got their hands on samples brought from the Moon. They found out that lava flows there contained not only carbon monoxide and sulfur, but also the building blocks of water. Thanks to these samples, researchers managed to calculate the amount of gas that rose and formed the atmosphere. It became the thickest around 3.5 billion years ago and existed for about 70 million years. After that, poof, the atmosphere was lost in space. But the coolest thing? When the Moon did have an atmosphere, the satellite was 3 to 10 times closer to our planet. One computer simulation even suggests the Moon was probably up to 19 times closer than it is now. The distance between it and our planet could be 18,600 miles, while these days our satellite is around 240,000 miles away. That's why the Moon looked much, much bigger in the sky. Unfortunately, at that time, not even dinos were around to admire the view. These days, the atmosphere of the Moon is almost non-existent, and that's why the satellite can't protect itself from meteorites. The surface of the Moon is dotted with craters. For comparison, there are about 190 identified impact craters on our planet. Many of them are hidden by vegetation or covered with water. But if we speak about the Moon, the number is so much greater, several million, and around 5,000 of them are more than 12 miles across. And since the Moon is less seismically active than Earth, these craters and other ancient formations stay in perfect condition for centuries. When you look at the Moon, it's the brightest object in the night sky. But in reality, its surface is dark because the reflectance of our natural satellite is just a bit higher than that of asphalt. You might know that the Moon's gravitational pull causes tides on our planet, making the oceans bulge out on both the side closest to the Moon and the one farthest from the satellite. But that's not all. The Moon also slows down Earth's rotation. This phenomenon is known as tidal braking. It increases the length of a day on Earth by a bit more than 2 milliseconds per 100 years. The Moon is also moving away from Earth at the same rate at which your fingernails grow. That's about 1.5 inches per year. If one day the Moon floats away into space, our planet will have to live through tough times. Without the stabilizing pull of the Moon's gravity, Earth's tilt would start changing wildly, from no tilt at all, meaning no seasons, to a large tilt, resulting in extreme weather. Even though the Moon's surface is mostly dormant, Earth's natural satellite still experiences moonquakes. One theory suggests that they may be happening because the Moon is shrinking as its insides are cooling. Scientists say that the Moon has become around 150 feet skinnier than it used to be several hundred million years ago. To help you understand it, picture a grape turning into a raisin. It wrinkles while shrinking. The same is happening to the moon. It's shrinking and it's wrinkling. But unlike the grape, the moon doesn't have flexible skin. Its surface is hard and brittle, so as the moon gets smaller, the crust cracks and breaks, and its sections get pushed over neighboring parts. Want to know another cool thing about the moon? A recent study claims that it has a tail. And every month it wraps around our planet like a scarf. This slender tail is made up of millions of atoms of sodium. And our planet regularly travels directly through it. Meteor strikes blast these sodium atoms out of the moon's surface and further into space. For several days every month, the moon remains between the sun and our planet. That's when Earth's gravity picks that sodium tail. Our planet drags it into a long stripe that wraps around its atmosphere. This lunar tail is totally harmless. It's also invisible to the human eye, 50 times dimmer than what you can perceive. But during those rare days, high-powered telescopes can spot its faint yellowish glow in the sky. The tail looks like a gleaming spot that's 5 times the full moon's diameter. And the spiciest fact for you, 2 or 3 years ago, an asteroid was pulled into Earth's orbit and started to travel around the planet. Even though it was no larger than an average car, it was still a big deal. Out of more than 1 million asteroids astronomers know about, it was only the second one to orbit our planet, called 2020 CD3. It was our temporary mini-moon. It didn't stay with Earth for long, though. The asteroid followed a random orbit and slowly drifted away. Temporarily captured objects such as 2020 CD3 are rare. They need to have a specific direction and speed to be caught by Earth's gravitational pull. Otherwise, they either crash into the planet or fly in another direction.
Hey, ever wanted to taste a salad from space? Well, you might be able to one day. Scientists have taken soil from the moon and successfully grown plants in it. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, it was the first time in our history we set foot on a surface that wasn't Earth. During the several trips to the moon in the Apollo program, astronomers brought back some rocks and soil to study. The researchers named the lunar soil regolith and used the seeds of a particular plant called you can read it here, which is found in Asia, Europe, and parts of Africa. They crossed their fingers, not knowing what would happen. The only thing they did know was that the lunar soil was too poor in nutrients to sustain any plants. So they created a lunar soil stimulant made from volcanic ash to replace the real lunar soil and went to work. Since they needed 2 separate experiments, they planted the seeds in Earth soil. It was a controlled experiment. They also planted some seeds in the lunar soil as the variable. They were very careful and used a single gram of lunar soil for the experiment. To their surprise, it only took 2 days to see little green leaves and 6 days for them to be properly visible. But sadly, after day 6, the lunar soil plants stopped growing. The soil wasn't enough to provide the needed nutrients for the plant to thrive. The seeds in the soil from Earth, however, grew lavishly. But not all was lost. Even though the lunar plants didn't continue growing, they survived and were harvested 20 days later. Sadly, they still didn't produce a yummy space salad. The scientists then studied the biological form of the plants and found out that the lunar plants were developing under a lot of stress, as if they were growing in a harsh environment, compared to their counterparts in the regular Earth soil. Either way, the study was a huge success. It was the first step in growing food in the soil that wasn't from Earth. NASA planned on a new moon landing in 2024, but due to some complications, it was pushed back to 2026. This will be the first time a person sets foot on the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. The next moon landing mission will allow us to collect more lunar soil samples to experiment with other crops and see which ones can live longer. Lunar soil in its natural state is far from the quality soil we have on Earth, but we might find a way to reduce the stress plants growing in it have to endure. Perhaps it'll let plants develop in similar conditions they would have in a proper natural setting. There might be other materials on the moon that can help plants grow healthy. The mission will be under the Artemis program. Elon Musk's SpaceX has been commissioned to build the lunar landing vehicle. At first, they will launch a test flight lasting about 3 weeks and then send astronauts to land at the Moon's south pole. Because that section is untouched by sunlight, scientists believe there might be water ice craters there that can be used to make rocket fuel. It would lower the cost of future Moon expeditions, since fuel wouldn't have to be imported from Earth. Besides potentially growing plants in lunar soil, using water ice from the craters as fuel would be another way of making the Moon self-sufficient for space exploration. Now, Mars would be one of the most difficult places to migrate to when you consider how Earth sustains life. But scientists believe that with the right engineering and living conditions, Mars can potentially become our new home. The red planet has a very similar force of gravity to that on Earth, which means that constructing buildings with proper infrastructure wouldn't be much of a problem. Our biological clocks wouldn't be too affected either, since a day on Mars is roughly 40 minutes longer than on Earth. Elon Musk plans on sending out robots to test the conditions on Mars before humans set foot there. These robots will be humanoids, mimicking the way people walk and move. They must be built in a special way to test how the conditions on Mars would affect us physiologically. These robots can also start constructing buildings for people to live and work in. We would have to be tremendously advanced in our agricultural innovations to grow crops in hostile environments. Despite being called the red planet, Mars is actually chilly, so we'd have to build giant dome-like structures to house a human population. They'd need to be self-sufficient enough not to have to rely on Earth's natural resources. These domes would protect us from harsh sandstorms and sub-temperatures. Now, a mission to Mars might not happen in our lifetime, but at the moment, we can take the first steps. Since we've found out that we can use lunar soil to grow something, the next step is to understand more about the process. We won't be living on the Moon anytime soon, so we can use the studies of lunar soil to help us solve some problems on Earth. Countries like India are adapting smart farming that uses robots to speed up the process. Some robots are designed for seeding, harvesting, watering, and other tasks. Robotic manufacturers are in high demand now. They produce unique machines like self-automated tractors and aerial vehicles that can hover over fields and water crops. This form of farming will increase productivity and reduce overall costs. It will also help save water by studying the exact volume crops need. A cool, innovative way of farming is vertical farming, which can be done in heavily populated cities. You can practically use any abandoned warehouse or building to do it. It recycles water used at the top of a vertical farm. It drips to lower levels and is then used again. The farmers stack plants in vertical beds for the water to drip easily. They also use both natural and artificial light. These farms are usually soil-free. Instead, plant roots remain in a nutrient-rich solution that is constantly monitored. This method is cost-efficient and supplies plants with the exact amount of nutrients they need. Other vertical farms use ponds with fish living at the bottom. These fish produce waste that is very rich in nutrients. Plants can use it as food. Vertical farms are growing more popular and may soon replace traditional farming. Vertical farming will allow farmers to grow almost 10 times the amount of produce than a plain field, all because they utilize the space above and below. You don't have to worry about little critters on the ground stealing your crops. You should only worry about flying ones. Indoor farming is becoming very popular. Crops growing outdoors always face natural hazards that can damage them. But with indoor farming, we won't have to rely on seasons to grow certain crops. Indoor farms can replicate the conditions of all climates, and we can have any fruit or veggie at any season. There's also genome altering to make every crop the best of the best. It will eliminate any bad seeds, literally. We won't have to waste tons of crops that aren't suitable for consumption. They can have extra nutrients and be healthier. All of these methods are just the first few steps before we begin with space agriculture on planets with hostile environments. Growing plants in space isn't something new. The International Space Station has an array of specialized gardens for growing veggies. Scientists are studying growing crops and plants in zero gravity, which can provide fresh food for astronauts. They use LED lights above plants to accelerate their growth and install proper watering mechanisms. This might be useful for a handful of astronauts at the International Space Station. But what if we were traveling across the galaxy to populate new planets? Well, we'd have to consider a large space dedicated to indoor farming. On the other hand, technology is likely to improve so much by then that we won't even need veggies and fruits in our daily diet. There might be other yummy alternative stuff to munch on. But hey, I'd rather have that space salad, please. Do you have any croutons? That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.